how would you introduce yourself, and what do you want people to perceive you as in terms of first impression when you are, getting the opportunity to meet new people?
Well, I guess I would say that, my name is James, and I'm a particle physicist here at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. I'm coming to you from lovely CERN, but it's just an office, so it's not really going to be so eye-popping at the moment. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess, I'm a particle physicist, but that's sort of one aspect of what I'm interested in. Just like everybody else, every other human, I'm a multifaceted person. And this, I kind of think of the Large Hadron Collider as unique as it is, and as kind of groundbreaking and eye-popping and mind-blowing as it is. It's sort of my day job. I have lots of other projects that I try to fit into my off hours, so to speak. And so, as you mentioned, I'd like to do these kind of like on stage monologues, these sort of science storytelling monologues. These are a lot of fun. I also, in fact, I'm a filmmaker too. I have a background in the arts and have lots of artist friends, and I host a lot of artist friends and collaborate with them in various places, including here at CERN and around the world. But yeah, I mean, I also do a lot of other things like anybody else. My path to where I am today is, which is a very unique place, I admit. And the kind of research that we do here is very unique as well. But my path here is not the kind of straightforward path that a lot of scientists take. I mean, it's funny because a lot of, it's a huge place. So CERN, I don't know, for those of you that don't know, those who might be listening that don't know, CERN is a rather large laboratory. It's a host laboratory for physics projects, and it doesn't really own anything. It hosts them. So I work on site here with, I don't know, 6 or 7,000 people per day that come on site, and several thousand of the other people around the globe that are still working on this research, because the physical projects might be based here, the experiments, the colliders and various things like that. But the people working on them are all around the globe. And so, there's a lot of people that come here, and, the vast majority, I think, of people that work at this kind of research, they take a sort of straightforward academic path, right? Where you start from, as a child, you think the science is interesting, and then you get someone tells you you're good at math. And I think that as an aside note, I think that everybody is potentially good at math. There's no such thing as a person who is naturally good or naturally bad at math. I think it's more a matter of trying to figure out where the sort of this culturally constructed math phobia was introduced somewhere in somebody's life. And then they go, the typical physicist does these things, and then they're good in high school, and they do like the physics classes, and they like it. And then they get to university and they do the same thing. And then maybe they do a PhD in physics. And then they, and all around, along the way, they've started to work on projects that are based here. And then they get to become a grad student, and maybe they're based here for a few years, and then they become a postdoc and they're based here. And so that's the kind of normal route. When I got to university the first time, I was like, I'm going to art school. So I have a background in film. I went to art school for film. And again, not as an intent. My intention was never to, move to Hollywood and become a, production assistant and work my way up to unit production manager. That was never my intention. I was not really interested in Hollywood style films, but, more interested in film as cinema, as an art form, as a means of exploring complex ideas. And so after I did that, though, and I never, I was also obsessed with physics and math. I always had been, and especially in high school. But then afterwards, I realized that I was still doing myself a disservice if I didn't study physics and math formally. So I went back to school, and I got a completely separate second bachelor's degree in a double major in physics and math. And everybody looked at me like I was a crazy person, because that's not that typical in the United States. And then so I did that anyway, and then I went to graduate school for my doctorate in New York at New York University, and along the way got involved in this kind of a research, and then I got a postdoc position based here at CERN, and so here I am, and I've been here for several years now. And so my path to get here was a bit strange, but I think it's it's interesting because it allows some other kinds of perspectives to seep into the research rather than just the kind of standard academic path. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to, as you can tell, it's hard to put into one sentence what I am, what I would think that I am, and I think that should be true for every single human being. But for me, definitely so.
Yeah, it's something that really impressed me during our, first conversation where we discussed your feature on the podcast was that, as you've mentioned, you're a filmmaker and you have, passion for art. So I'm very interested to hear, through your childhood or through your early years, how did, your passion and fascination develop in terms of both science and in films? Because it's very rare to meet people who are equally interested in the empirical and the science aspect of life. It's usually this sort of a, of a stigma where you either can be a very analytical person or a very emotional person, and you sort of either go to one of the directions. And, it's very rare to meet people who are equally interested in both paths. So I'm very interested to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that in fact you will run across several people in physics, especially in physics, particle physics, astrophysics, physics that have a long-standing, and sciences in general have a long-standing interest in art as well. Maybe they don't have an artistic practice, but some do, either for relaxation or for as a hobby or something like that. And so I don't know. I mean, for me, as a child, I was always just kind of, I was one of these kids that was always drawn to the sort of like edges of our human knowledge, the sort of like how far can we push things until they break? How far can we go until we don't understand something anymore? So, I like to say that no one really chooses to be a physicist. It's physics chooses you, because that's the place where you find yourself if you're that kind of kid where you never accept, that's just the way it is as an answer. Like if you ask if you're like ask your dad, why is the sky blue? And your dad just says, that's just the way it is. Some kids just roll their eyes and then go read comic books and never think about it again. But, the physicist is the one who said, that's not satisfying. I need to know the answer. And so they ask somebody else. And if nobody has the answer, then you go to the library. So I was a big library guy, and I always have been. And I would go there to find my answers to multiple things. And it was interesting because every time you find an answer to something, the question you had, it opens up about 10 more questions that you didn't know you had. And those are equally fascinating. So this is the kind of thing where, science as a human pursuit, right, there's nothing magic about it. There's nothing sort of, there's nothing kind of like unnatural or like, special in a sense. But there is, it is a special set of tools, but it's nothing magic. It's simply the best way that humans have, the only way that we have, in fact, to separate truth from falsehood to any reasonable degree, to any kind of reasonably reliable degree. And so once you recognize that as a child or as an adult, you realize that science is amazing. And again, science is not a list of facts. It's a process. It's a process by which we ask and answer questions about the world around us to get to reliable conclusions about the world around us. So that's pretty much it. And so when you think of it that way, it's not that, the desire to answer these questions, I admit that there are certain people who I still think that deep down inside, everybody is secretly a particle physicist because of the thing we're talking about here. But I think that, there are some people that for whatever reason, maybe acculturated, maybe natural, whatever, they don't really like to dig deeply down to the underpinnings of everything. But there are those people that are kind of naturally drawn to those kinds of questions. But if you think about the desire to even ask and answer such questions, like, what's outside the universe, or, how small can I cut anything, which is basically what we try to, the question we ask here at CERN and various places around the world, that the desire to ask those questions, or the urge to ask those questions, comes from a gap. It comes from a separation. And the separation is between what I currently right now understand about the world and what I think that my understanding is, quote unquote, and then some new observation that I make that doesn't fit with that, right? And so when you have that's where curiosity comes in. You're like, well, wait a minute. So, think way back in the day, when people were like, oh, well, I've been every night I come out here and I see these white dots on the sky kind of moving in different directions. And then suddenly I start to see one like that I've been tracing for months, and it does this strange thing where it kind of goes around. The rest of them go in this kind of flat in this straight direction, but this one has been doing this strange thing. I wonder why that is, right? Because for me, I mean, maybe my village elders told me that these were, the stars were, there was a solid dome of sky above, and maybe they were painted on this dome, but that wouldn't make any sense if it was just a dome that was moving, and that would make that one of them wouldn't do this weird curlicue thing compared to the others. That doesn't make any sense. So that's where, again, I've been told one thing. I have one set of understanding. I have a new observation. That gap is where curiosity comes in. And in fact, you can think of art as a kind of similar thing. The desire to do art for a lot of artists, at least my favorite artists, the ones that are really driven, is because they have a similar experience, right? Is that you have some current understanding of the universe and whatever that means, like psychology, politics, society, whatever, interpersonal relationships, grieving, happiness, things like this. And then some new thing comes along, some new experience, some new sensation, some new idea. It doesn't fit with what I currently understand. And that creates this gap. It creates this separation. And so the artist is like inextricably drawn to that gap. Like, what, that's fascinating. Why is this? So I think of science and art are as two different modes of human inquiry, if you will. There are two different ways by which humans, try to dig into this gap between known and unknown. And of course, the outcomes of these two different modes of inquiry, right, are very different, right? I mean, scientific papers and robust conclusions about the universe versus, the different, impressionistic or expressionistic pieces of art and things like that. And of course, we judge the outcomes very differently, right? I mean, it would make no sense if the entire artistic community got together and wrote a document that said, we have determined that there is only one correct way to appreciate a Joan Miro painting, right? That would be insane. But that's what we do with science, right? It's like, okay, we look through all this data, and this is the best conclusion that we have based upon this data, right? So again, we judge the outcomes differently, but I think that for a lot of scientists, the fire in the belly that comes to do either science or art, or for a lot of either scientists or artists, this fire in the belly comes from a similar place. It's a kind of curiosity. So I don't know. I think that a lot of scientists do secretly have that. They have, and again, sometimes not even secretly, explicitly. There's a lot of scientists that do some art stuff on the side, or they maybe have a side gig in the arts too. Yeah. And I think that, over the years that I've met so many other artists that are fascinated by science as well, I think that, that's another piece of evidence that these kinds of disciplines, if you will, are connected, at least back at the fire in the belly or the fire in the heart to do them perspective.